Who would it be? Shakespeare? Ray? Okay, Matthew Arnold. Any other guesses? Who? Charles Martin. Yeah, our own Charles Martin. Yeah. No, it's none of those. Who would pass out handouts for me, please? Would you pass them out? Thank you. Would you pass out Thank you. We are going to study, one of you got it right. We're going to study C.S. Lewis today. See, some of you might have been hoping that we'd put him higher up on the list, but he's number 9, the 9th, in the opinion of your clergy, the 9th most significant Anglican is C.S. Lewis. What do y'all know about C.S. Lewis? Y'all know C.S. Lewis? Yeah? All right, we're still passing out handouts. Last week we talked about William Wilberforce. I thought it was what a great session. I really enjoyed it. I learned, even though I prepared for it, I still, as we discussed it, learned some things about William Wilberforce and his contribution to Anglicanism and to Christianity more generally. And I trust that the same will be true in our exploration today about C.S. Lewis. Who still needs a handout? Anybody still need a handout? All right, well, let's pray the prayer today. Let's pray that prayer out loud together. O God of searing truth and surpassing beauty, we give you thanks for Clive Staples Lewis, whose sanctified imagination lit fires of faith in young and old alike. Surprise us also with your joy and draw us into that new and abundant life which is ours in Christ Jesus, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. I wonder who it'll be next week. You'll have to come back to find out. Let me make this white space disappear. Who would read for us, please, this which is taken from Lesser Feast and Fast? Who would read this little biography of C.S. Lewis according to the Episcopal Church? Who would? Thank you, Jeannie, right up front. Raise your hand again. Thank you. Oh, it's not.
Who is C.S. Lewis? You must make your choice, C.S. Lewis wrote in Mere Christianity. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up as a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. Lewis did not always believe this. Born in Belfast on November 29, 1898, Lewis was raised as an Anglican but rejected Christianity during his adolescent years. After serving in World War I, he started a long academic career as a scholar in medieval and Renaissance literature at both Oxford and Cambridge. He also began an inner journey that led him from atheism to agnosticism to theism, and finally to faith in Jesus Christ. Lewis's conversion inaugurated a wonderful outpouring of Christian apologetics in media as varied as popular theology, children's literature, fantasy, and science fiction, and correspondence on spiritual matters with friends and strangers alike. In 1956, Lewis married Joy Davidman, a recent convert to Christianity. Her death 4 years later led him to a transforming encounter with the mystery of which he had written so eloquently before. Lewis died at his home in Oxford on November 22, 1963. The inscription on his grave reads, "Men must endure, they're going hence."
Thank you. November 22nd, 1963. What else happened that day? John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Turns out that Lewis died about 50 minutes before John F. Kennedy, and hardly anybody noticed because the world was captivated, of course, with John F. Kennedy's assassination. Interesting that they died on the same day. How many of you have ever read anything written by C.S. Lewis? A lot of us. Yeah. How many of you have read something besides the Chronicles of Narnia? Okay, a good number. I'm impressed. All right, what are some of the things that you've read? Mere Christianity? A couple of us? Screwtape Letters? Yep. What about An Encounter with Grief? Anybody read An Encounter with Grief? Okay. What else? What else have you read by Lewis? Surprised by Joy, his autobiography. Yep. Space trilogy. Oh, that's a good one. A friend of mine who used to be an Anglican priest, who's now a Roman Catholic priest, who his name is Michael Ward. He goes by Spud. Spud Ward wrote a PhD thesis on the space trilogy. Yeah. The Great Divorce. Yeah. What else? All of his letters? Yeah, lots. So if you've read a lot of Lewis, you already kind of know the answer to this. But the question I want us to ask is, other than children's stories, which are significant, like why would we celebrate his life as a saint of the church? He is in lesser feasts and fasts. He has been approved as a saint that we as the entire Episcopal Church would commemorate on November the 22nd every year. It's an optional feast. It's a lesser feast, an optional feast. But his life and witness is so significant that the Episcopal Church says on the day he died, it is worth us pausing to remember him and his witness as they teach us something about our faith. So the question I want us to ask as we look at Lewis is, what is it about his life and his writings that's worth us remembering in addition to being a beloved children's author? Let me tell you a little bit about Lewis, and then we'll read some of his works. He was born and raised an Anglican. He is not British, at least not originally. He was Irish. He was from Belfast. He's born in 1898, and he was born at a time when Ireland was still unified, before the division of Ireland. He's born in Belfast, which later would become Northern Ireland, raised Church of Ireland. His grandfather had come to Ireland from Wales, so he did have British roots, British identity. His maternal grandfather, his mother's father was a Church of Ireland clergyman, and his mother's great-grandfather was a bishop in the Church of Ireland. So good, established church identity that he did not like. His mother, sure enough, was the first female graduate in mathematics of Queen's College in Belfast. So she was significant as a scholar and also as an individual, as a woman who was the very first to do that. Does anybody know what, some of you have read his letters, does anybody know what his friends called him? Remember what his friends called C.S. Lewis? It wasn't Clive and it wasn't Staples. Anybody remember? Jack. Everybody called him Jack. Do you know why they called him Jack? When he was 4 years old, his beloved pet, Jaxie, a dog, was killed after being run over by a horse-drawn carriage. And he, as a 4-year-old, insisted that he be called Jaxie, which was the name of that pet. And eventually he gave up on Jaxie, but insisted that people call him Jack for the rest of his life. What an interesting sort of way to go through life. Loved the works of Beatrix Potter. Right? Beatrix Potter, Peter Rabbit. Yeah, Peter Rabbit. And other works. And indeed would write stories and illustrate his own stories about animals, anthropomorphic animals. His mother died when he was 9 years old. I promise not everybody will have parents who die as children. But after his mother died, he was sent to England to study. That didn't go well. He came back to Ireland. That didn't go well. He went back to England. And while he was back in England, the combination of being away from home, his mother's death, and his adolescence led him to give up on Christianity. And he gave up on it pretty thoroughly. He was a delighted atheist. George Sayer wrote a biography about C.S. Lewis and interviewed one of his school classmates who said of Lewis, he was a bit of a rebel. He had a wonderful sense of humor and was a past master of mimicry. I think he took his work seriously, but nothing else. Never took any interest in games, never played any, so far as I can remember, unless he had to. I met him in Oxford after the war and noticed he had changed, but was staggered to find him the author of the Screwtape Letters. When I knew him, I can only describe him as a riotously amusing atheist. He really was pretty foul-mouthed about it. So imagine like going back to your high school reunion and the kid that was the hellion is now the Episcopal priest. That was kind of C.S. Lewis for people who knew him. We'll talk more about his conversion in a little bit. He went to Oxford in 1917 and studied in the officer training school, was commissioned in the military, sent to the front lines in France, fought trench warfare until he was injured in fighting, was sent back to England to convalesce, and was so depressed that they couldn't send him back to the front lines. They sent him back to Oxford. He was kind of, in some ways, a failure as a soldier. When he went back to Oxford, he read Greats, which is like classics. It's a 4-year degree rather than a 3-year degree at Oxford. And you study Greek and Latin and then philosophy. And he had top marks in his what's called mods, kind of the first 2 years, and then had top marks in that first degree, and then also had top marks in English, triple first, which is pretty special. Became a fellow of Magdalen College and continued to teach English as an avowed atheist. But then, again, as we will read, returned to deism in 1927, then became, again, a professed Christian in 1931, partly because of the influences of authors like George MacDonald and G.K. Chesterton, but also from colleagues and friends like J.R.R. Tolkien and Hugo Dyson. He returned to the Anglican Church, and he was an Anglican, an Orthodox Anglican, but didn't kind of make a big deal about it. He thought of himself as a mere Christian, right? His phrase he borrowed from Chesterton, which kind of gave up on the denominational distinguishing features and was more interested in kind of a universal way of talking about Christianity, though later in his life he did show some signs of Roman Catholic influence as he wrote about things like purgatory. When World War II broke out, he tried to re-enlist at the age of 40. The army did not want him at the age of 40. They said, "Why don't you write propaganda?" And he said, "I can't write lies, even if it's to the enemy." So he wouldn't do that. So he returned to academic life. After the war, he accepted an appointment to a new chair, the chair of medieval and Renaissance literature at Magdalen College, Cambridge. Not long after he came to Cambridge, and this will be significant because we'll read some from his work about grief, he met, as we heard in his biography, a woman named Joy Davidman. Davidman was an American. She was an atheist who had recently converted to Christianity. In order for her to stay in the UK, she needed to get married. And Lewis was very fond of her as a friend and an intellectual partner, and they got married in a civil service so that she could stay in the UK. But very quickly that became more than just a marriage of convenience. They fell in love and they were married in an Anglican, a Christian service, which wasn't easy because she had been divorced before. They were married after she became ill. She did recover for a little while, but eventually died 3 years after their Christian marriage, 4 years after their initial marriage. And Lewis wrote A Grief Observed. He wrote it under a pseudonym as his way of processing his great loss, the loss of the love of his life, Joy Davidman. After he wrote it under a pseudonym, a lot of friends and colleagues recommended his book to him and said, "You should really read this. It sounds like something that you could benefit from." Only after his death was it revealed that he was the author of that. He became ill in 1961, 2 years of fairly poor health, and eventually died after having a heart attack, as we said earlier, on November the 22nd, 1963. About 50 minutes after he died, John F. Kennedy was shot. Thoughts, questions, comments about Lewis's life, the biography, before we read some of his text? Things about C.S. Lewis. Anything that you heard? Yeah. And then Ray. Yep.
Yeah, so the question about why he's so influential.
Yeah.
To me, it's because he speaks from an experience before, like of a person of one who had no faith and came to faith.
Yeah.
And is able to help others like that make insightful epiphanies.
Yeah.
And transition into faith.
Yeah.
In an intellectual way.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. The whole area of Christian theology, it's not just Christian theology, the whole area of theology that is about not just convincing, but sort of justifying or arguing for the faith from those who would be critical of it is apologetics, right? Apologetics is how we sort of say, despite all the criticisms, this is what we hold on to. And his apologetics were born from an adult conversion, right? Yeah, which gives, you're right, some authenticity to his experience. Absolutely. Ray.
I'm probably saying the same thing. He lived through the death of God and tried to draw on his own wit, his own imagination, and the resources of the high culture of the West to try to overcome that death.
Yeah, thank you.
He also is a voice against the counterculture.
Huh. Say more
And
about that. Yeah, help me understand. What do you mean?
So, I mean, at this time when you have, there's a lot of stirrings about how enforced, I'm trying to think of the word, anyway, being forced to be Anglican by default
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
limits your rights.
Yeah.
And at this point, he's kind of saying, look, I did the whole wandering in the wilderness on my own,
Yeah.
and then I came back to it.
Yeah.
And as he is in later life, in the 50s and 60s, you start having the countercultural movement, and a lot of people are a little bit concerned, like, what are these kids doing nowadays?
Yeah.
And he's giving, the next generation the Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah.
So it's basically saying, we might have missed the boat with these kids, but we'll catch them on the next generation.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Sometimes the reaction to secularism and the growing of secularism is to double down on conservative, insistent expressions of faith. And Lewis would say, well, maybe that's not all that helpful, right? One of the fascinating things is I grew up in the American South in a place that was largely dominated by evangelical Christianity, and evolution, the theory of evolution, was largely identified as an ungodly, faithless thing. And when I went to England and studied in England, I was genuinely surprised that the denial of evolution was not present much in evangelical circles. Like, evangelical circles in England were kind of baffled that evangelicals in the United States wouldn't believe in evolution. There are some, but most of them are like, why would you be disturbed about that, right? And I think largely voices like C.S. Lewis help find that moderation. All right, let's read. The first bit is long, but his conversion is so important. So I have a lot from his conversion story. Would somebody read the first 2 paragraphs of the bit from Surprised by Joy? Who would read those first 2 paragraphs? Thank you, Pam, up front. And Jeannie, since you're right there and you're such a good reader, would you please pick up after those first 2 paragraphs and read the rest of Surprised by Joy on that in the next page? Thank you.
When I began teaching for the English faculty, I made 2 other friends, both Christians. These queer people seemed now to prop up on every side, who were later to give me much help in getting over the last stile. They were H.V.V. Dyson, then of Reading, and J.R.R. Tolkien. Friendship with the latter marked the breakdown of 2 old prejudices. At my first coming into the world, I had been implicitly warned never to trust a papist, and at my first coming into the English faculty, explicitly never to trust a philologist. Tolkien was both. The odd thing was that before God closed in on me, I was in fact offered what now appears a moment of wholly free choice. In a sense, I was going up Headington Hill on the top of a bus, without words and, I think, almost without images. A fact about myself was somehow presented to me. I became aware that I was holding something at bay or shutting something out, or if you like, that I was wearing some stiff clothing like corsets or even a suit of armor, as if I were a lobster. I felt myself being, there and then, given a free choice. I could open the door or keep it shut. I could unbuckle the armor or keep it on. Neither choice was presented as a duty. No threat or promise was attached to either. though I knew that to open the door or to take off the corset meant the incalculable. The choice appeared to be momentous, but it was also strangely unemotional. I was moved by no desires or fears. In a sense, I was not moved by anything. I chose to open, to unbuckle, to loosen the rein. I say I chose, yet it did not really seem possible to do the opposite. On the other hand, I was aware of no motives. You could argue that I was not a free agent, but I am more inclined to think that this came nearer to being a perfectly free act than most that I have ever done. Necessity may not be the opposite of freedom, and perhaps a man is most free when, instead of producing motives, he could only say, I am what I do. Then came the repercussion on the imaginative level. I felt as if I were a man of snow at long last beginning to melt. The melting was starting in my back, drip, drip, and presently trickle, trickle. I rather disliked the feeling.
Thank you.
People who are naturally religious find difficulty in understanding the horror of such a revelation. Amiable agnostics will talk cheerfully about a man's search for God. To me, as I then was, they might as well have talked about the mouse's search for the cat. Remember, I had always wanted, above all things, not to be interfered with. I had wanted, mad wish, to call my soul my own. I had been far more anxious to avoid suffering than to achieve delight. I had always aimed at limited liabilities. The supernatural itself had been to me, at first, an illicit dram, and then, as by a drunkard's reaction, nauseous. Even my recent attempt to live my philosophy had secretly, I now knew, been hedged round by all sorts of reservations. I had pretty well known that my ideal of virtue would never be allowed to lead me into anything intolerably painful. I would be reasonable. But now what had been an ideal became a command, and what might not be expected of one. Doubtless, by definition, God was reason itself. But would he also be reasonable in that order, more comfortable? Since not the slightest assurance on that score was offered me. Total surrender, the absolute leap in the dark were demanded. The reality which no treaty can be made was upon me. The demand was not even all or nothing. I think that stage had been passed on the bus top when I unbuckled my armor and the snowman started to melt. Now the demand was simply all. You must picture me alone in that room in Magdalen, night after night, feeling, whenever my mind lifted even for a second from my work, the steady, unrelenting approach of him whom I so earnestly desired not to meet. That which I greatly feared had at last come upon me. In the Trinity term of 1929, I gave in and admitted that God was God and knelt and prayed, perhaps that night the most dejected and reluctant convert in all England. I did not then see what is now the most shining and obvious thing, the divine humility which will accept a convert even on such terms. The prodigal son at least walked home on his own feet. But who can duly adore that love which will open the high gates to a prodigal who is brought in kicking, struggling, resentful, and darting his eyes in every direction for a chance of escape? The words compel intrare, compel them to come in, have been so abused by wicked men that we shudder at them. But properly understood, they plumb the depth of the divine mercy. The hardness of God is kinder than the softness of men, and his compulsion is our liberation.
Thank you. Thank you both. What do you hear? What do you notice? What's given to you in those words? Trent.
Yeah, what I hear is not someone crafting a argument, but telling the truth of his story,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, thank you. What else? What else is given to you in those words? Yeah, Richard up here. Thank you. Elizabeth?
To use some of C.S. Lewis's own words, what I'm reading here is that he was dragged kicking and screaming into heaven.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. What else? Adam.
Yeah, and struck by like how like you were saying, it doesn't present it as coming to terms with an argument that he's figured out, but more of unbuckling his armor and becoming who he really is.
Yeah. What else? What, if you've read other things of Lewis, how does that resonate with other things that you've read or what you understand about Lewis? How does this conversion moment, it's not really a moment, how does the story of his conversion inform what he writes elsewhere? Does anything surprise you in this text? Yeah. Elizabeth, behind you. Sarah, thank you.
I think I heard it correctly and read it, that he talks about that when he kind of like gave himself over to it, that the imagination just opened up, and what he was able to tap into was really released. And so thinking about, like the beautiful works that he's written, especially for the youth, like the imagination behind it being so inspired and his connection to the divine being a part of that.
Yeah, thanks. Who else? I saw another hand. Jeannie up front.
I think in all the writings that I've read, it's something like, I'm a man, or you're a man, human, and you're confronted by something that you can't deny.
Yeah,
And it's just a simplicity of
yeah.
being human and being confronted by divine, and you can't deny that divine that you're confronted with.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. That leads me to a good question. What kind of God does C.S. Lewis believe in? How would C.S. Lewis describe God as you hear it in this text? What are some of the characteristics of God? What are the distinct expressions of identifications of God that you hear in this text? Yeah, Pam.
He uses the word humility for a God who would accept someone that he has to bring in.
Yeah.
kicking and
So
screaming.
humility, surprising word. Yeah, all the way in the back, Jonathan. We're giving Elizabeth her steps today. Thank you. Charlotte can speak too.
Lewis has a very patristic God, like God who refuses to be God without us, the God who refuses to stop knocking, refuses to stop chasing, like that, and he gets into that in other works like The Great Divorce.
Yeah. What else? Who else has a response? Yeah, Vicky.
I like when he said the hardness of God is kinder than the softest of men.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I think it's a really curious thing to talk about God in such gentle, inclusive, humble ways, and yet talk about God in such powerful, distinct, and clear ways. I think we usually get one or the other. We either get someone who loves to talk about God as this the threshold that you would never even notice, just the easiest zero entry pool, faith, baptism is just like a lobster in a pot that's being heated, it's a frog in a pot that's being heated slowly, right? That's that God. Or they're like God, take it or leave it kind of God. And Lewis has this unwavering commitment to the uniqueness and the unicity of God, and yet presents that overwhelming God. He didn't even have a choice. He had a choice, but he didn't have a choice. And yet God is gentle. I think it's a really curious way of talking about God, which I think largely makes him effective in the 20th and even now in the 21st century. Anybody want to respond to that claim? Yeah, Ray.
On the second page of your handout, this second paragraph from Surprised by Joy, this is his experience of kind of an inductive experience of God. I think he's trying to reproduce this same experience for the reader in all of his works.
Yeah, thank you. All right, let's read a little bit from Mere Christianity. There's so much we could read from Mere Christianity, but this is the part that I've chosen for us to read. Mere Christianity began as a series of radio broadcasts. After the army refused him and he refused the invitation to write propaganda, he ended up offering BBC radio spots kind of words of encouragement in the midst of the Second World War. And largely, those talks were put together as what we think of as Mere Christianity, published years later. Who would read these 2 paragraphs from Mere Christianity for us? Thank you, Mary Margaret.
I have been asked to tell you what Christians believe, and I am going to begin by telling you one thing that Christians do not need to believe. If you are a Christian, you do not have to have one belief. If you are a Christian, you do not have to believe that all the other religions are simply wrong all through. If you are an atheist, you do have to believe that the main point in all religions of the whole world is simply one huge mistake. If you are a Christian, you are free to think that all these religions, even the queerest ones, contain at least some hint of the truth. When I was an atheist, I had to try to persuade myself that most of the human race have always been wrong about the question that mattered to them most. When I became a Christian, I was able to take a more liberal view. But, of course, being a Christian does not mean thinking that where Christianity differs from other religions, Christianity is right and they are wrong. As in arithmetic, there is only one right answer to a sum, and all the answers are wrong. All the other answers are wrong. But some of the wrong answers are much nearer to being right than others.
Thank you. Thank you. So he holds both. Being a Christian does mean thinking that where Christianity differs from other religions, Christianity is right and others are wrong. But some answers are a lot closer to the right answer than others. What do you hear in that? What's the gift to 21st century Christianity and Christians in this text? What's the gift of this text and this approach, this mindset? Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's telling us to practice humility.
Yeah, practice humility. Thank you. What else? What else is the gift? Yeah, Ray.
He's offering some sense of certainty, some promise of certainty.
Yeah, there is some certainty. Yes. Yeah, what else is the gift? What's the challenge? What's threatening about these words, whether to you or to others? What's threatening about these words? Yeah, Richard.
Well, we've all been taught certain kinds of things in our culture about other people, and we're even taught to fear them. And there are so many, it's hard to just start naming them, but you know, there are people that are interested in neo-paganism or Buddhism or even atheism or whatever, and he's challenging those cultural assumptions.
Yeah.
And it's trying to help us grow.
Yeah.
And we really need to be able to plug into our community and know what's going on with other people, so we can create a caring, cooperative community,
Yeah.
which I think is our goal.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Mary Margaret or Jeannie, whichever way you want to go first.
I think he's offering us common ground with which to connect all humanity.
Yeah, common ground. Yeah, Mary Margaret?
Yes, that was really similar to what I was going to say, like a sense of interfaith peace, that there are a lot of places for overlap, and being a Christian does not mean having this self-righteous perspective.
Yeah, thank you. I went to an interfaith gathering in Springdale not that long ago, and an interfaith group that does work in Little Rock is thinking about starting some more intentional work in Northwest Arkansas. So they asked people from different traditions to be there. And the Roman Catholic priest who was there said part of our training as Roman Catholic priests is to learn about other religions so that we can recognize and respect what is good and right in them. And I thought, what an interesting to be formed in a way that anticipates connection with people beyond a faith. Not so that you can prove them wrong, not so that you can, the Roman Catholic Church would say they're not right, but the purpose of that is not to arm you for battle, theological or otherwise, but to build connection. That's a different way of doing it. I think this text invites connection rather than building walls. But it doesn't do so by watering down what is Christian. Like that certainty, that there's something absolute, as Ray mentioned earlier, that is being offered here, which is maybe refreshing, but it's being offered in a way that isn't threatened by recognizing what is good or near right in other traditions. Thoughts about that? That sounds very familiar to me, in a good way. Yeah, Trent.
I'm just thinking of the opposition between identity and relevance. And so where I'm going with this is Lewis goes through an experience of his identity of himself really being unmade. And it allows his identity to be remade in very creative, authentic, powerful ways. Yeah. So, and that's threatening. The path to that is one's identity being unmade and remade. Yeah. That's pretty threatening.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure this is a fair response, but I also note that he believes that a Christian perspective is more liberal in the classical sense, more embracing, more tolerant than a truly atheist perspective. Right? I think that's a curious angle to look at this, right? If you are an avowed atheist, you must sort of operate knowing that, as he says, the great majority of humankind for all of history has been wrong about what they would say is the most important thing that they've ever thought, right? And yet as a Christian, at least we're all, at least most of us are on the same page, right? Only now the atheists are wrong. Perhaps he doesn't say it that way, but right? Yeah. I think it's an identity that is full and distinct, that is also accepting and not threatened by that. I think it's fascinating. All right, let's move to grief. So this is the book that he wrote after his wife died. He wrote it under a pseudonym. And I've given you a lot because he really wrestles with some deep theological things. Would somebody read the first 4 paragraphs, because they're short, so to the end of "Let me get away with it"? Who would read those first 4 paragraphs, and then I'll get somebody to read the last 2. Who would read the first 4 paragraphs for us? Thank you, Mark. And who would read the last 2 paragraphs for us? Thank you. All the way in the back, Tammy, so you're going to have to move. Mark, yep. Thank you.
No one ever told me that grief felt so much like fear. I'm not afraid, but the sensation is like being afraid. The same fluttering in the stomach, the same restlessness, the yawning. I keep on swallowing. At other times, it feels like being mildly drunk or concussed. There's sort of an invisible blanket between the world and me. I find it hard to take in what anyone says, or perhaps hard to want to take it in. It's so uninteresting, yet I want the others to be about me. I dread the moments when the house is empty. If only they would talk to one another and not to me. There are moments most unexpectedly when someone inside me tries to assure me that I don't really mind so much, not so very much, after all. Love is not the whole of a man's life. I was happy before I ever met H. I have plenty of what are called resources. People get over these things. Come, I shan't do so badly. One is ashamed to listen to this voice, but it seems for a little to be making out of a good cause. Then comes a sudden jab of red-hot memory, and all this common sense vanishes like an ant in the mouth of a furnace. On the rebound, one passes into tears and pathos, maudlin tears. I almost prefer the moments of agony. These are at least clean and honest, but the bath of self-pity, the wallow, the loathsome, sticky, sweet pleasure of indulging it, that disgusts me. And even while I'm doing it, I know it leads me to misrepresent H herself. Give that mood its head, and in a few minutes I shall have substituted for the real woman and a mere doll to have blubbered over. Thank God the memory of her is still strong. Will it always be so too strong to let me get away with it?
Thank you. And now Tammy in the back.
Meanwhile, where is God? This is one of the most disquieting symptoms. When you are happy, so happy that you have no sense of needing Him, so happy that you are tempted to feel His claims upon you as an interruption. If you remember yourself and turn to Him with gratitude and praise, you will be, or so it feels, welcomed with open arms. But to go to Him when your need is desperate, when all other help is vain, and what do you find? A door slammed in your face and a sound of bolting and double bolting on the inside. After that, silence. You may as well turn away. The longer you wait, the more empathetic the silence will become. There are no lights in the windows. It might be an empty house. Was it ever inhabited? It seemed so once, and that seeming was as strong as this. What can this mean? Why is He so present a commander in our time of prosperity and so very absent a help in time of trouble? I tried to put some of these thoughts to sea this afternoon. He reminded me that the same thing seems to have happened to Christ. Why hast thou forsaken me? I know. Does that make it easier to understand? Not that I am, I think, in much danger of ceasing to believe in God. The real danger is of coming to believe such dreadful things about Him. The conclusion I dread is not, so there's no God after all, but, so this is what God's really like? Deceive yourself no longer.
Thank you. What's the gift to us in these words? Yeah, Christine, all the way up front.
I've read some of his other books, but not this, and I think I'm going to go get it. He just nailed it. The feelings you feel when you've lost someone you love so much.
Yeah, it's real. So you resonate with that description
Yes,
of the experience. Yeah.
And I guess that is a gift to us.
Yeah, thank you. What else? What else is a gift to you, to us, from these words? Yeah, Tammy in the back. Thank you.
I believe it's a gift to know from reading His words that the feelings we feel are not isolated in the human condition.
Yeah.
We've all got them.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. What else?
I loved the part where he's talking about the closed door during grief.
Yeah.
Because it can feel like you are wandering in the fog in grief, and the one door that you hope will open to you can sometimes, even if the silence does feel empathetic, the sense of abandonment will never truly go away.
Yeah.
And he's saying this is a universal understanding of grief, no matter where you are in your life.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, emphatic grief, not empathetic, emphatic grief. Yeah. What else? What else is the gift of these words? What does certainty look like here? It's different. I mean, I don't think it's lost, but I think maybe this is the reality of the kind of faith that he's been inviting people to explore. I think that the Episcopal Church's summary of his life did a really good job at the end, where it said, like, his experience of grief led him to a transforming encounter with the capital M mystery of which he had written so eloquently before. Like, I feel like his other writings are now sort of being lived into. He is experiencing them again, a different kind of crisis of faith, coming at it from the other side. And I think there's for me, the gift in these words is the gift of a faith, the certainty of which is not sort of scrutable, is not easily expressed. It's hard, it's gritty, but it's still real. Yeah, Trent.
Yeah, I was going to say that on the other side of the closed door is not a sense of no one, nothing being there, but a sense of God being there and having to come to some understanding of, okay, so who is God in light of this experience?
Yeah.
That's the certainty.
Yeah.
That there's someone on the other side.
Yeah, yes. Yes, as he says at the end, I'm not worried about my result being no God. I'm worried that that I'm going to leave with the sense that this is all God is. This is who God really is. Absent. Vengeful. Yeah. Sarah. Up front.
In a way, I'm probably saying things other people have said, but I think there are times in his writing where he really goes to some trouble to say there are things that between us and God where we take things that we think are hard, and in fact they're really easy.
Yeah.
And we make it hard. I think what he's doing here is saying, this actually is hard, and I am not going to pretend that it is easy.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. All right, one more comment. Brentley? No, you'll need the microphone for people at home.
Microphone still works great. Am I clear? More clear now? Okay. I feel like he's discussing how you can be thrown 100 million different angles, even, perhaps how religion can split. It's a tree that has many branches. Just kind of at the end of the day, keep it simple and sweet. Don't lie, steal, and cheat. And so that's where he starts to feel lonely, like he's getting shut off from the world, perhaps because his depths go deeper than others. Some might go deep, but in one direction. Whenever he's just kind of like, hey, I'm in the middle of all this, and hey, don't lie, steal, and cheat. Keep it simple and sweet. Anyways.
Yeah. Thanks, Brentley. Thank you. Yeah, so I hope reading Lewis and thinking about Lewis has invited you to re-engage Lewis. Many of us have read Lewis a long time ago. Some of us have read Lewis more recently. I think what I celebrate about his witness is the importance of that witness today, not just in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and early 60s, but even now. There's an authenticity to it. There's a distinctly Anglican identity to it, but it's not a distinct identity that ends up limiting. In some ways, I think he and Wilberforce are opposite sides of the same effort. Like Wilberforce is critical of those who kind of give up on the distinctness of God, and Lewis is critical of those who would sort of make God so distinct as to elbow others out. So held together, I think it's a really good pair. Next week, Sarah Milford will be leading our class on the number 8 Anglican, and I hope you'll be here for it. Thanks so much.